Garbage. It's not a pretty sight. Garbage isn't something that we normally want to talk about. After we throw our garbage away, we like to forget about it. But we can't afford to forget about the garbage and trash that we throw away daily. There are too many problems associated with the waste we create. Problems like pollution, running out of natural resources, running out of places to put our garbage. In one way or another, these problems affect every one of us. And every one of us needs to help solve them.
Hello, my name is Richard Southern. I'm here today to talk about things like garbage and trash and other things we throw away. Now, this may seem like a strange setting in which to talk about garbage, but garbage is something that affects our environment in many far-reaching ways, even in a place like this. Take this, for example, litter. It's hard to get away from it. Litter is ugly. It also can stay around for a long time. Now, this banana peel isn't as bad as many things. It isn't exactly beautiful, but it will decompose. It'll break down into little pieces and eventually turn to soil.
But other things are different. Take this aluminum can. Do you know that it takes about 500 years to decompose, to turn into soil? And what about this burger container made of styrofoam, a kind of plastic? How long do you think it'll take it to decompose?
Well, scientists are not sure. Some say it may never decompose. Imagine that. Never. And there are millions, billions of containers like this, many of them littering our landscapes. All these things are solid waste. You may have heard that term, solid waste. It's been in the news a lot. But solid waste doesn't just refer to the litter people discard carelessly.
It also means all the waste that people like you and me put in trash cans and take out to the curb to be taken away. Solid waste includes old newspapers, furniture, broken toys. Solid waste also includes construction debris, rubbish, scraps, and materials discarded or thrown away by restaurants, schools, factories, and other places. But let's focus on the solid wastes created by people like you and me. The typical American throws away about 3.5 pounds of garbage each day. 3.5 pounds for every man, woman, and child. Let's think about that. Take your average family of 4. At 3.5 pounds per person, this family throws out about 14 pounds of trash and garbage every day. In a week, that comes close to 100 pounds. In a year, make that figure 5,200 pounds. That's more than 2.5 tons.
2.5 tons. Whew. That's a lot of garbage. And a lot of that garbage is valuable. Now, that may seem strange, the idea that garbage can be valuable. But if you take a close look at some of the things many families throw away each week, you can understand why.
With the help of an adult, do a survey of your own garbage. If your family is like most, you'll probably find glass bottles, aluminum pie plates and foil, plastic milk containers, tin cans, and lots of paper, including newspapers. Now, all these things may look worthless, but they're made from valuable natural resources.
Natural resources are things found in nature that provide the raw materials we need to make things, such as wood for houses, iron for cars, wool and cotton for clothes, or anything else that we build or make.
For instance, let's look at some of the things we typically find in our garbage. Natural resources were used to make this aluminum pie plate. Aluminum is part of something called bauxite, which is found in the ground and has to be mined. Aluminum is separated from the bauxite and then used to make cans, pie tins, aluminum foil, thousands of different things. But once the bauxite is taken out of the ground, it can never be replaced. Bauxite is what is called a non-renewable resource. That means that once it's gone forever. Oil is another non-renewable natural resource. Once oil has been pumped out of the ground, it can never be replaced. As we use up the Earth's oil, it's becoming harder to find new places where oil can be easily pumped. Much of the oil that is pumped out of the ground is used to make gasoline for cars, trucks, and buses. But lots of other things are also made from oil. And many of these things end up in your garbage, like this plastic milk container. Plastic is made from oil. Think of all the things that you throw away that are made from plastic. Food wrappings, soft drink bottles, toys. When you throw away such things, you're also wasting the oil that was used to make them. Here's something else. What about these newspapers? What kinds of natural resources do you think were used to make them? Well, paper is made from trees. In fact, it takes about 17 trees to make 1 ton of paper. But wait a minute, you may be saying. You can't replace bauxite and oil, but you can plant new trees. Now, this is true. Trees are a renewable resource. A renewable resource can be replaced. We can grow new trees to replace the ones that are cut down to be made into paper. So it appears there shouldn't be any problems about wasting paper. But there are problems. It takes years for a tree to grow, and we can't always be sure that we can replace the ones that we cut down. So, even though trees are a renewable resource, that doesn't mean that we have no limit on using them. Besides wasting natural resources, we create other problems with the garbage we throw away. Have you ever wondered what happens to garbage once it's picked up and carted away? One thing for sure, it doesn't just disappear. It has to go somewhere. It used to be that garbage and other solid wastes were put in open dumps and just left there. These were not only smelly and ugly, they were unhealthy. Such open dumps were often full of toxic substances. Toxic substances are things that are poisonous and may cause disease. Some of these dangerous substances could get into the ground and leak down into underground water sources. Water that people used for drinking could become polluted. Garbage and other wastes also used to be commonly incinerated or burned, and this polluted our air. Today, some wastes are still incinerated. However, open dumps are now largely illegal. Most places handle their garbage in a different way. For example, New York City brings much of its garbage by barge to the Fresh Kills landfill on Staten Island. Here, it is loaded into huge dumpsters and hauled to the top of a small mountain. This mountain is composed entirely of garbage and other solid wastes. As you may imagine, it is dirty and smelly. But Fresh Kills is different from an open dump. It is what is known as a sanitary landfill. Sanitary landfills are places designed to reduce the hazards of pollution. They don't accept certain hazardous materials like oil, gasoline, and poisonous chemicals. So while the wastes in sanitary landfills are not exactly beautiful, they are less likely to contaminate or poison our air and water. In sanitary landfills, the solid wastes are also covered every day with a layer of dirt. This helps prevent fires, keeps away rats and insects, and also prevents litter from blowing away. So, sanitary landfills seem to be a pretty good answer to a lot of our solid waste problems, right? Not exactly. While most sanitary landfills don't accept hazardous chemicals, there are still poisonous substances that can cause pollution of water around the landfill, both underground water and water on the surface.
And as waste in landfills decompose or break down, they sometimes create toxic gases, poisonous gases that can pollute our air.
We've already seen another problem. Valuable natural resources are being buried in landfills. Things like aluminum, paper made from trees, and plastics made from oil. Once they're buried, these resources are lost to us forever. Another problem is that many sanitary landfills are filling up quickly, and we have to find new sites. But that's not so easy. You need a lot of open land for a landfill. And near most cities and towns, it's hard to find land that's not already being used for housing, businesses, and other things. Also, most people don't want a landfill near their homes. Landfills are noisy and dirty, and there's a lot of traffic from trucks. People also worry about pollution from landfills. Despite all the precautions that sanitary landfills take, there may still be toxic chemicals that can leak out. People worry that such chemicals might contaminate or poison their drinking water or harm their environment in some other way. And there is still another problem. If land for new landfills can be found, it's usually far away from the towns and cities where most of the garbage comes from. It takes more time for trucks to drive to these landfills, and this requires using more energy in the form of gasoline.
So solid wastes are everyone's problem. My problem, your parents' problem, your school's problem, and yes, your problem too. But fortunately, there are things we all can do to help solve some of the problems.
One thing is obvious. We can avoid disposing of garbage improperly. That means don't litter. Thank you.
Not littering is a start, but there's much more that needs to be done. You, your family, your friends, and your school can help by observing 3 simple rules. These rules are sometimes called the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Let's look at the 3 R's to see what they mean. We'll start with reduce. We can go a long way towards solving our solid wastes problems and protecting our environment if we can simply reduce the amount of wastes we produce in the first place. How? There are lots of ways.
Here's an example right here. Paper cups and plates certainly make things more convenient. When you're through eating, there are no dishes and glasses that have to be washed. All you have to do is dump them in the trash along with all the other garbage. But that's precisely the point. Once they're thrown away, they become part of our solid waste problem. Next time, suppose you were to use regular plates and glasses instead. These plates and glasses can be used again and again, often for many years. Things like paper plates, plastic cups, and paper towels and napkins are called disposables. Disposables are designed to be used once and then thrown away. By not using disposables, you reduce the amount of solid waste you throw out. And that helps solve some of our solid waste problems in several ways. It saves room in our landfills. Over the long run, it also means fewer natural resources are wasted. Fewer trees are cut down for paper. And less oil is pumped out of the ground to make plastics.
We all use and then throw away a lot of things that we don't really need. Packaging is another prime example. By packaging, I mean all the boxes and wrappers and containers that hold things that we buy.
Look at all the packaging you get when you take home food from a fast food restaurant. Among other things, there's the paper bag for the French fries, the container for the burger, the cup for the soda, and then another bag that holds all these things. There's probably more packaging than food. And where does this packaging end up? Most of it usually gets thrown away.
Do you know that over 1/3 of everything we throw out is packaging? Now, we could get by very easily without a lot of it. But this means changing some of our buying habits. By buying things with less packaging, you can do a lot to reduce solid wastes.
Here's another example. Here are 2 boxes of cereal. One is much smaller than the other. But it would take 20 of the smaller boxes to hold the same amount of cereal as the bigger box. So by using the large box of cereal, you're actually cutting down on the amount of packaging you throw away.
There are other ways of reducing the amount of garbage and trash we discard.
How many times have you or a younger brother or sister broken a toy and then thrown it out and bought a new one to replace it? Well, next time this happens, try fixing the toy rather than throwing it out. Not only does this reduce your trash, but it saves the money that would have been spent on a new toy.
There are lots of ways to reduce solid wastes. You just have to think about it a little more and try a little harder.
Now let's move on to the second of our 3 R's, reuse. To follow this rule, you try to find ways to reuse things rather than throw them out. Take a plastic margarine tub. You might throw it away once it's empty. But instead of throwing it away, you could wash it and use it to store things, like paper clips, rubber bands, marbles, or lots of other things. What about an ordinary paper bag from the supermarket? Can you think of any ways it might be reused? How about using it to hold some old stuffed animals? Or clothes that no longer fit? A paper bag can even be used to make a costume. Even when we can't reuse something, somebody else might be able to. For instance, a friend might be able to fix an old bicycle that to you seems broken and useless. Once fixed, this bicycle can be ridden again. In a way, reuse is like our first R, reduce. By reusing something, you are reducing the amount of solid wastes that are thrown out. Now let's talk about the third R, recycle. To recycle means to take old things like newspapers, aluminum cans, and glass bottles and make them into new things. For example, there are places that take old newspapers, wash them to get rid of the ink on them, cut them up, and use them to make new paper. Recycling old paper makes sense for several reasons. Paper that is thrown away fills up valuable space in sanitary landfills. But every old newspaper recycled rather than thrown out does not end up in a landfill, so valuable space is saved. Recycling also saves natural resources. It takes 17 trees to make 1 ton of paper. Making that ton from old paper saves those 17 trees. Recycling also saves energy and cuts down on pollution. When paper is made from trees, it takes a lot of energy, and in the process, chemicals are used that pollute the air and water. But making paper from recycled paper rather than from trees requires less than half as much energy and creates less air and water pollution in the process.
Less water and air pollution, less energy used, saving natural resources by cutting down fewer trees, less space taken up in landfills. Recycling paper makes sense for a lot of reasons, and other things can be recycled with similar savings.
Aluminum cans, pie plates, foil, and other things made from aluminum can be recycled so that the aluminum can be used again. Compared to making aluminum from bauxite ore, recycling aluminum uses 95% less energy. It also produces much less pollution. Glass, used motor oil, tin cans, different kinds of paper, including cardboard, and even many kinds of plastic can also be recycled.
Some experts say that more than 80% of the things we throw away could be recycled and used to make new products instead. But how do you go about recycling? Obviously, you can't do it all yourself. You need help.
Well, many places around the country are helping to make recycling easier. Some communities have recycling centers. Such centers accept many different kinds of materials, from plastic bottles to old newspapers. In many towns and cities, you don't need to go to a recycling center. Recycling is as easy as taking out the garbage. That's because these communities pick up the materials that need to be recycled. They take them right from your house or apartment building. They usually ask only that you separate recyclable materials into different groups, such as glass, recyclable plastics, metals like tin and aluminum, and newspapers.
Different communities have different systems for recycling. Some places may not require that you separate recyclable materials into different categories at all. They'll do the separating for you.
Other places may require more separating. For instance, they may ask you to separate glass by color. There are also other things that can be recycled. For instance, leaves and yard clippings. Some communities collect such yard wastes and take them to a composting site, a place where these wastes will decompose and turn into valuable soil. You can also build your own composting site by making a place to pile your leaves. Over the course of a year, the leaves will decompose. The recycled leaves will provide soil that can be used in a garden.
No matter what or how much you recycle, it really takes only several minutes of time each day. Several minutes a day. That's not a whole lot, particularly if you think of how recycling can help solve many of the problems we have with solid wastes.
In this program, we've seen how solid wastes take up valuable space in landfills, and how we're rapidly running out of places in which to put our wastes. We've seen how many of the things we throw away were made from valuable natural resources, such as trees and oil. And we've seen how making these things often requires a lot of energy and produces pollution. But we've also seen that there are 3 rules, the 3 R's, that we can observe to help solve our problems with solid wastes. We can reduce the amount of waste we throw out by changing our buying habits so we use less packaging, and by cutting down on paper towels and plates and other disposables. We can reuse things like paper bags rather than throwing them away. And we can recycle things that are made from valuable resources and that take up space in our landfills.
Reduce, reuse, recycle. 3 simple rules that can help preserve and protect our environment. More and more people are observing these rules, doing their part in the battle to control solid wastes. Won't you help too?